Hello everyone, today we're going to talk a little bit about swordsmanship. Now, swordsmanship and guns are closely related because before they had gun control, they had sword control, okay? European and Asian peasants basically were not permitted to own swords for obvious reason that the ruling class wanted to be able to control them better, so they would prohibit it from owning those type of weapons and getting training in them, okay? Now, one of the things to know about European knights, okay, is their primary weapon was their horse, okay? They rode into combat on horseback, and you know, before they had the you know, the armor and the swords, the first thing that they had to get was the horse, okay? On average, it took the annual income of one village to support one knight. So this stuff was kind of expensive back then. And it's also the reason why you had a limited number of knights out there, okay? Now, if you're on horseback, what you're doing is you're using the momentum of the horse to help you swing, okay? Because you can't really get your hips into the swing. So you're riding along, you're holding the reins here, you might have a small shield, and you're holding the reins behind the shield. And as you're going along, you typically have the sword in a high position like this, and you're swinging down, and you're making your cut, okay? So if you have a knight, again, ahead of you, right, as you're driving by, or riding by, you're making your cut. So you're using the momentum of the horse to make your cuts. The cut is very similar to what you would see from a modern day polo player. You know, the guys that are on the horse, you know, with the sticks trying to hit the ball. Same body mechanics. Okay. Now, one important thing is that, you know, this point right here, you're not swinging it out, okay, because otherwise that's going to get hurt. What you're doing is you're swinging down in this manner like that. Okay, and it's you know, the only thing about working out and lifting weights, basically it's the same idea as doing like you know, French presses or push downs, or if you're working with with the ropes. Okay, that's your pivot point right there. Okay, and you have to work with that. So the pressure has to be like this. It cannot be on the inside of the elbow. So when you're riding by on a horse and you make your cut, okay, you know, the elbow goes like that. Or like that. It's got to be a tight shot that doesn't stress your elbow. Okay. Now, sometimes knights did fight on the ground. Various reasons for that. They might be in a dense forest like this. They might be in a camp and they're attacked. You know, whatever it is, they sometimes would fight on the ground. If they're on the ground and they have swords, they will usually have a shield. Okay. They came in various sizes. Now, with the key component of the shield is the shield stays in front of you. Okay, and basically what you're doing is you're attacking around the shield. Okay, so that's a very important component. It's not like in the movies where you swing and the shield goes in one direction, the sword goes in front of you. The shield stays in front of you at all times. Now, this is what we call a blade heavy sword. Okay, a typical Norman sword. You know, was used throughout Europe because of all this. You know, you have so much mass up near the tip. I mean, this is only a 3-pound sword. But, you know, compared to, let's say, a sword like this, you know, okay, you can see how that you know, there's a lot more thickness in the blade up here versus in the sword like this. Okay? So because you have more mass up there, there's two ways to generate power. Okay, the way you're going to generate power with this is usually with the hips. Okay, so it's, you know, hip, chest, and then the arm extends. Okay, so again from that side, okay, so all my power generation is down here in the legs. Okay, that's where my power generation is. Another way to generate power is to use the momentum of the sword. So basically, you know, if I swing like that, I can basically swing the sword around and make my cut. So I can use these rotational cuts where so I'm generating power through the momentum of the sword, and I'm using gravity and so forth. Okay, so that's another way to generate power with this type of a sword. Now, as towns and cities started to develop, you know, people started wearing less and less armor in towns and cities. Okay. Now, the type of armor that was used primarily through most of history was either mail armor, okay, also known as chainmail, you know, which is a series of links, of round links, or leather, or layers of cloth. Okay. So that's the most common type of armor that you would see. Now, you can't cut through that type of armor. Okay. So even if the sword is sharp, you can't cut through it. So what you're doing is you're making these these powerful blows that rely on the power from the lower body to basically break bones. Okay, you're trying to break bones through the armor. Okay, the plate armor that we normally see in the movies, that only lasted for maybe 100, 150 years. So that plate armor only lasted for a very short period of time. For most of history, they're using leather, they're using chainmail, they're using layers of cloth. Okay, and we're using percussive blows, meaning basically think of this as a crowbar with an edge on it. Okay, and the purpose of the edge is not to cut; it's more to concentrate the power. Instead, at one point. So it's possible to break bones through that armor. Okay, so as towns and cities started developing, you start seeing less and less armor. So because people are wearing less armor, they start using lighter swords. Okay, so this sword is more tapered. There's less weight over there. Because this sword now is a little bit lighter, I can now use less hips. Okay, so I can maybe just turn my hips just a little bit, extend the arm, and make my cut. Okay, and this is going to make a really fast cut. Now one of the things I'm doing is I'm using a pull-push technique, where basically I'm holding the sword kind of with these two fingers, and just by closing my hand, I'm creating leverage. With the sword, you can see it, where I'm kind of pulling. I'm holding here, and it's a push-pull. Okay, so with a sword like this, that's got a lot of mass up near the blade, I would have to basically step, use that push-pull to make my cut. Okay, you can also, you can make it to the other side as well. So there's a couple of ways, but basically I'm using my hips, I'm using my core, and then finally I'm using the push-pull. In towns and cities, basically you start seeing these lighter swords. So with a lighter sword like this, okay, I don't need as much legs to make to generate that power. So with a sword like this, instead of starting with this foot back, where I'm relying on that step, I might actually start with this foot forward, which is going to give me a little extra reach. And with this, I'm basically just relying on that push-pull to make my cut. Okay. Now, this type of a sword, okay, basically eventually evolved into the rapier. Okay, where basically, the back of the sword got even thinner. And what they started doing is, again, since people aren't wearing armor in towns and cities, you only need about 2 or 3 inches of penetration into a muscle to put somebody out of commission, to get them out of the fight. So, they start basically, using, what we think of like typical fencing techniques. Okay, so that developed out of a sword like this. Now on the battlefield, okay, around the 15th century, when you start seeing guys in plate armor, okay, now basically you got these plates, and even with this type of a sword, it's not as effective. You can't make those percussive blows and break bones through that armor. Okay, so they start using swords like this. Now, there are better weapons for dealing with guys in heavy armor, like war axes and pole arms. But they did also have a sword like this. Now the purpose of, this is a very, very pointy sword. The purpose of this point is basically to get into gaps in the armor, which is usually going to be the armpits, around the groin, into the neck. So wherever you have gaps, you're basically using this as an ice pick. As you can see, this is a very stiff sword. Okay, it's a giant ice pick. It's not going to give much. Compared to a sword like this, okay, you can see how that's going to, that's going to flex. Okay, this sword is designed basically for cutting. Okay, so that's a nice pick, for fighting guys in plate armor. This is a cutting sword for guys in lighter armor that were used for most of history. Okay, very similar to the Roman spada. This Roman spada might have been a little bit shorter, but it would have had a different cross guard. But the spada was used by Romans from horseback. So again, you're using, you start seeing these longer, the spada being longer than the gladius. The gladius being a much shorter, like 2-foot sword that was used in foot combat. The spada was used, to make those cuts from horseback, using the momentum of the horse. Okay. The thing to take away from this is that, the sword is going to tell you how it wants to be used. Okay, depending on the balance of the sword, you know, how the weight of the sword, you know, an experienced person is going to pick it up and is going to move it around a little bit, and they'll figure out what the balance point is and what the sword is, you know, how it's going to be used most efficiently. I hope you enjoyed watching this. I'll see you next time.